Radio 4 Extra.
It's 7 o'clock and it's Alan here on 4 Extra. We're in half an hour with a real treat for fans of Morecambe and Wise. It's the omnibus edition of Louis Bath's biography of the duo, read by Penelope Keith, who you might remember famously starred with them in a very funny sketch involving a staircase. Sunshine and Laughter is at 7:30. And remember, you'll find many more factual programmes like this to listen to right now on BBC Sounds. Now on 4 Extra, it's time to join the poet Daljit Nagra as he once again dips into the BBC's poetry archive.
One of the concerns for me as a poet is how to write about social injustice. I've lived through injustice and some hardship, and I've witnessed inequality around me, as I'm sure we all have. But how to turn this injustice into poetry and maintain the integrity of the poem, that it be sensual and subtle? I mention this because in today's episode we feature two poems which are read, rather brilliantly, by Andrew Sachs. They are both poems of social injustice, one about a workhouse and the other set in a prison. We have chosen this programme to honour that great campaigner of social injustice, Oscar Wilde, who died 125 years ago on 30th November 1900. Stories in Verse, two poems of social protest, was first aired on the World Service in May 1993. Over now to presenter Joy Boatman.
Hello, today two poems of social protest. In the Workhouse, Christmas Day by George R. Sims, and The Ballad of Reading Gaol by Oscar Wilde. Two very different writers, but each with the same passionate awareness of hypocrisy and injustice. George R. Sims, who was born in 1847, was an extremely popular newspaper columnist, as well as a playwright and novelist. A radical reformer, he also wrote some highly melodramatic ballads, highlighting the wretched lives of the poor. The ballads were intended to be recited aloud. Public recitals were much enjoyed in his day. Among his targets were the public workhouses, grim institutions which housed and fed the destitute. Men and women were housed separately, and much heartbreak and misery was caused to married couples who were forced to part. Here first, then, is In the Workhouse, Christmas Day by George Sims, read, or perhaps I should say recited, by Andrew Sachs.
It is Christmas Day in the workhouse, and the cold bare walls are bright with garlands of green and holly, and the place is a pleasant sight. For with clean-washed hands and faces, in a long and hungry line, the paupers sit at the tables, for this is the hour they dine. And the guardians and their ladies, although the wind is east, have come in their furs and wrappers to watch their charges feast, to smile and be condescending, put pudding on pauper plates, to be hosts at the workhouse banquet they've paid for, with the rates. Oh, the paupers are meek and lowly, with their "Thank'ee kindly, mums." So long as they fill their stomachs, what matter it whence it comes? But one of the old men mutters, and pushes his plate aside. "Great God," he cries, "but it chokes me, for this is the day she died." The guardians gazed in horror. The master's face went white. Did a pauper refuse their pudding? Could their ears believe aright? Then the ladies clutched their husbands, thinking the man would die, struck by a bolt or something by the outraged one on high. But the pauper sat for a moment, then rose mid a silence grim, for the others had ceased to chatter, and trembled in every limb. He looked at the guardians' ladies, then eyeing their lords, he said, "I eat not the food of villains, whose hands are foul and red, whose victims cry for vengeance from their dank, unhallowed graves." "He's drunk," said the workhouse master, "or else he's mad and raves." "Not drunk or mad," cried the pauper, "but only a hunted beast, who, torn by the hounds and mangled, declines the vulture's feast. I care not a curse for the guardians, and I won't be dragged away. Just let me have the fit out. It's only on Christmas Day that the black past comes to goad me and prey on my burning brain. I'll tell you the rest in a whisper. I swear I won't shout again. Keep your hands off me, curse you! Hear me right out to the end. You come here to see how paupers the season of Christmas spend. You come here to watch us feeding as they watch the captured beast. Hear why a penniless pauper spits on your paltry feast. Do you think I will take your bounty and let you smile and think you're doing a noble action with the parish's meat and drink? Where is my wife, you traitors? The poor old wife you slew? Yes, by the God above us, my Nance was killed by you. Last winter, my wife lay dying, starved in a filthy den. I'd never been to the parish. I came to the parish then. I swallowed my pride in coming. For ere the ruin came, I held up my head as a trader, and I bore a spotless name. I came to the parish, craving bread for a starving wife. Bread for the woman who'd loved me through 50 years of life. And what do you think they told me, mocking my awful grief? That the house was open to us, but they wouldn't give out relief. I slunk to the filthy alley. 'Twas a cold, raw Christmas Eve, and the bakers' shops were open, tempting a man to thieve. But I clenched my fists together, holding my head awry. So I came to her, empty-handed, and mournfully told her why. Then I told her the house was open. She had heard of the ways of that, for her bloodless cheeks went crimson, and up in her rags she sat, crying, "Bide the Christmas here, John. We've never had one apart. I think I can bear the hunger. The other would break my heart." All through that eve I watched her, holding her hand in mine, praying the Lord and weeping till my lips were salt as brine. I asked her once if she hungered, and as she answered, "No," the moon shone in at the window, set in a wreath of snow. Then the room was bathed in glory, and I saw in my darling's eyes the faraway look of wonder that comes when the spirit flies. And her lips were parched and parted, and her reason came and went, for she raved of our home in Devon, where our happiest years were spent. And the accents long forgotten came back to the tongue once more, for she talked like the country lassie I wooed by the Devon shore. Then she rose to her feet and trembled, and fell on the rags and moaned, and "Give me a crust, I'm famished, for the love of God," she groaned. I rushed from the room like a madman, and flew to the workhouse gate, crying food for a dying woman, and the answer came, "Too late." They drove me away with curses. Then I fought with a dog in the street, and tore from the mongrel's clutches a crust he was trying to eat. Back through the filthy by-lanes, back through the trampled slush, up to the crazy garret, wrapped in an awful hush. My heart sank down at the threshold, and I paused with a sudden thrill. For there, in the silvery moonlight, my Nance lay, cold and still. Up to the blackened ceiling the sunken eyes were cast. I knew, on those lips all bloodless, my name had been the last. She'd called for her absent husband. Oh, God, had I but known! Had called in vain, and in anguish, had died in that den, alone. Yes, there, in a land of plenty, lay a loving woman dead, cruelly starved and murdered for a loaf of the parish bread. At yonder gate last Christmas, I craved for a human life. You, who would feast us paupers, what of my murdered wife? Get ye gone to your dinners, don't mind me in the least. Think of the happy paupers eating your Christmas feast. And when you recount their blessings in your smug parochial way, say what ye did for me too, only last Christmas Day.
In the Workhouse, Christmas Day by George R. Sims. Similar in target, but no doubt even more keenly felt, since it was the product of first-hand experience, is The Ballad of Reading Gaol by Oscar Wilde. The poem is dedicated to Charles Wooldridge, a young soldier of the Royal Horse Guards, convicted of murdering his unfaithful wife and hung for this crime at Reading Gaol in 1896. Wilde was at that time a fellow prisoner at the jail, serving a sentence in connection with charges of homosexuality, and he was appalled at the barbarity of the hanging. Andrew Sachs reads The Ballad of Reading Gaol.
He did not wear his scarlet coat, for blood and wine are red, and blood and wine were on his hands when they found him with the dead, the poor dead woman whom he loved, and murdered in her bed. He walked amongst the trial men in a suit of shabby grey. A cricket cap was on his head, and his step seemed light and gay. But I never saw a man who looked so wistfully at the day. I never saw a man who looked with such a wistful eye upon that little tent of blue which prisoners call the sky, and at every drifting cloud that went with sails of silver by.